This is going to be a crossbar brace for the rear shocks, and I need 2 bends in it that are equal and equal distance in from the ends. So I made my marks here, figured out how much material will be taken up in the bends, and then we happen to have 2 clamp blocks for the 1-inch tubing, so I just put one at either end, sitting flat on the table here, so I can stick it in the bender, bend one end, spin it around, bend the other, and they'll be perfectly aligned. Saves a little bit of time, makes it more accurate. This piece is going to go up here on the inside. It'll go from this brace here across to this one. It's going to come up to kind of clear the radiator and then back down. And then that'll leave plenty of space and options for shock mounting. This entire rear subframe is removable. So here, it's kind of hard to tell, but I have little sleeves welded onto the chassis here, and then these just slip over them. Later on I'll drill a hole through it and bolt it on both sides. But then the back part of it is all just bolted on to these 4 swing arm mounts, just like the front. And then as far as the shape of this goes, obviously I mimicked the front with the X and all of that. And then these supports here just kind of come up to tie into these braces, which will hold the shocks. And this is also partially just aesthetic, to make it, to sort of tie in the lines of the chassis with the lines of the body so that it looks, you know, intentional, instead of just like, oh, we stuck this plastic thing on top of this chassis. The radiator is still just, you know, sitting there basically, but that's where the fan will go, which I think looks pretty sweet. And then there'll be room for actual little taillights later on. The way these tubes are, and this whole rear end still leaves space for the radiator hoses to connect to the frame rails. So this one on this side will probably come out around the chassis and then back to the radiator, and then this side will probably do something similar, except it'll have to come out and then up a little ways and back in. I'll try to make that look as nice as possible, but that's how it's gonna go. The rear is kind of to the point of needing the actual shocks before I can go much farther, so I'm going to switch to the front and do kind of the same thing. Build a rough outline of the shock support, and then, you know, we'll finalize the mounts and everything when we get the actual shocks. These are actually the front shocks off of the Odyssey. They make a good stand-in for the shocks that we'll actually use up here. And for the support, I bent up this big hoop, and now I'm modifying it a little bit. I'm going to have it attached right to this subframe, because whatever shock support I have up here will probably need to be removable, and it'll act as an actual bumper if, you know, you hit something that's narrow enough to go between the front wheels and tall enough to hit, like a tree.
This is really what most time spent on this build has looked like so far.
Yeah, sitting in front of it, holding up parts to find the way to make it look the best and work the best. I got this crossbar in here. It's got a little bit of an arc there that I did with the tubing roller. It's not fully located or welded, it's just there so that I have that to look at. And I've been sitting here staring at this thing all morning, and I think I've come up with something that I really, really like. So I'm gonna run a tube up and out kind of like that, which will be very similar to the rear. We've known for a while now that these fenders in the front, as you can see, do not clear the tire at full suspension travel. This isn't even, there's more travel there, but it's close. So we've talked about making tube perimeter fenders like a real, you know, pimped out Jeep would have. I'm gonna go ahead and go forward with that because I may be able to make this whole front bumper assembly subframe come out here and then continue on down the fender and then tie into the frame underneath and then have the whole thing just unbolt from the front to disassemble, which would be super cool. So I'm going to start by trimming back the plastic on this just to the edge there and see how that works with suspension and steering, and then, you know, keep trimming as necessary to get a fender that can clear everything.
And it's commitment time. Starting the day with some sizzling.
Good way to start the day. So this is just another one of the various little bolt tubing sleeve things that there are many of already on this build, and now there's about to be more. So this one is a two-part one. I need to clean this one up, I just finished welding it, but they'll fit together nice and seamlessly like that. This one's just a sleeve. That one's threaded, and where that goes is on this shiny new tube fender here. So this part goes here, and then that part goes there, and then once I have it bolted and tacked together, I'll trim this end off and make it look pretty. But what this does is keeps this whole front section removable. So you can just undo this bolt and the whole thing will come off. But it's also nice and sturdy and it looks seamless. This one ended up being 3 separate pieces because when I went to do this bend, I accidentally stuck it in the bender upside down and bent it the wrong direction. So I was just like, well, no sense scrapping it, just cut it, rotate it 180 degrees.
Yeah.
Weld it back together.
It's not a structural part anyways.
It's not seriously structural. It's kind of like, you know, secondary structural. It adds to the strength, but it's not required.
Yep, seamless, you're right.
Yep, just a teeny tiny little line. think this fender came out as close to perfect to the other one as possible. It's all just tacked together right now, obviously, but yeah, I'm gonna make another one of the sleevey, brackety attachment point things here. And then of course eventually we'll have our little shock mount things going up like that, wherever they go. Getting the fender to line up nice and smooth. Not gonna be perfect yet, I'll touch it up more when we take it apart, but just getting it to look nice and even.
Yeah, it looks really cool.
Plastic's kind of an annoying substance. It's easy enough to cut, but
It's hard to look perfect.
yeah. The front bumper and fender tubes is basically complete. This whole thing is all one piece and it's all removable. So 4 bolts here, and then these 2 inside these tubes here. And the whole thing just comes right off.
Yeah, that's so cool.
I'm a really big fan of that type of connection.
Yeah.
Not only does it look really clean, but it's incredibly strong because the mounting surface of the bolt all the way around it is supported by the tube versus like, let's see if I can even find a basic tab. Well, like these shock tabs, right? They're plenty strong for what they are, but like this tab, you could imagine if you had a force on it here, it could easily just bend up against the bolt. Well, with the tube all the way around it, that flange, whatever part the bolt or the nut presses on, is supported not only all the way around, but right next to the end of the shoulder on the bolt, or the nut, whichever it is. So the reason this all has to come off is the same reason this has to come off, to get the diff out. That's about all we've got time for this week, but next week I'll work on doing the same style of tube fenders on the rear. This crossbar still isn't welded in because I haven't decided where it's gonna go or if it's gonna be there at all. I like the way it looks because it adds a line that ties in the bottom of the grill, but then it doesn't really tie in with anything else. So we'll maybe put a light bar there, see if that looks cool, or maybe see what a winch would look like there. But either way, I'm not gonna tack this piece in until we know what's happening there. I was really kind of concerned about the front end of this and how it was all going to tie together visually and structurally because there's so little space for the shock mounts, and they all have to be removable for the engine to come out. But I think this is going to both look really cool and be quite strong.